See, this is the Wisconsin River down in through here. And here, there were two mounds here, and they put their canoes or whatever they brought. That was their super highways back then, was the rivers. I think around the 10th of December, and I thought, well, they're watching the sunset, and I thought, well, geez, that's going to set. That probably will point to where the sun sets on the shortest day of the year. And so I wrote the university and asked them to give me the bearings of where the sun sets in my area at certain times of the year. And then I talked to Professor Steckel, Frank Steckel. So I called him up. And he was very nice, and he said, I'll be up and we'll look at these mounds. And he worked with me for quite a while.
I grew up in a small town in southern Wisconsin called Monroe, which is a town of about 10,000 strong and known for its mostly Swiss-German roots, and is home to the famous biennial Cheese Days Parade, where thousands of people gather together, listen to yodeling and polka, drink beer and eat cheese curds. Let's just say that Monroe is your archetypal Wisconsin town. About an hour and a half driving distance from where I grew up, heading northwest and following right along the mighty Wisconsin River, lies the remnants of an ancient mound-building culture that most people know little to nothing about. This particular set of mounds is deemed Frank's Hill, after their founder, steward, and keeper, Frank Shadewald. It is said that the effigy mound civilization lived in Wisconsin from roughly 700 to 1200 AD. Generally speaking, the mounds at Frank's Hill are said to be about 1,000 years old. Frank's family had grown up for generations along the Wisconsin River, in and around Muscoda, a quaint and sleepy little river town. Growing up, Frank had been well aware of the remnants of other mounds in and around the area, and learning that some of these mounds were in danger of being sold to a developer, Frank purchased them before they were forgotten and ultimately destroyed.
Welcome to Ka-Wankachak. That means Sacred Hill. I told her to get a full one.
One early evening in December, while chopping wood up by the mounds, Frank noticed that the sun seemed to set in alignment with one of the linear mounds on his property, and from this simple observation, Frank began a journey of discovery and a never-ending quest for knowledge related to the site and the people who built the mounds on Frank's Hill. Growing up and spending my formative years as a cheesemaker, yes, that's right, my high school mascot was a cheesemaker, I had never heard anyone speak about the widespread and very prominent mound-building culture of the indigenous Americas. Not a word. Not from the locals, not from the regional history books. Nary did I hear a word about this culture in my high school history classes or by my formal state-mandated education as a cheesemaker. And even though Effigy Mounds National Park was only a few hours west of my hometown, I can't remember once hearing about the culture and history of the peoples that built them. So last year I flew back to the Heartland, my homeland of Monroe, Wisconsin, to visit my family, and we drove over to Frank's Hill on what turned out to be a blistering cold and windy day. I had visited Frank's effigy mounds previously, about 2 years prior, but wanted to go back to document some of the observations I made, and ultimately make this little film piece about this little piece of Wisconsin's history. Driving along Highway 60 west towards Muscoda, keeping the Wisconsin River on your left, is an excellent drive. The entire Wisconsin River Valley is very beautiful, and I never really appreciated my surroundings when I was a child, as much as I should have anyway. But coming back after many years, I've gained a certain affection for the natural landscape there. The entire state of Wisconsin is really a gorgeous state. From Lake Michigan and Door County to the winding rivers of the Kickapoo, Wisconsin has a lot to offer. Taking Highway 60 west to Highway 193, pulling off to your right, you will see the first set of mounds. The landscape is well cared for, and so the mounds are easily seen, as they are large, some 100 feet across and some about 3 feet high. As Sarah Milhouse of Big River Magazine remarked, by the time you get up to the first mound, you are afforded just absolutely stunning views of the surrounding hills and fields of the lower Wisconsin River Valley. It's easy to see why people mark this as a sacred place. In July, the effigy mounds are covered with Queen Anne's lace, grasses, and wildflowers. Hill East contains a group of effigy mounds thought to represent a coyote, a bison, a bird, a beaver, and a coiled snake. The bird mound also has been interpreted as the pregnant woman or the corn lady. The mounds on Hill East are in direct east-west alignment, or the places of the rising and setting sun. Because these particular mounds were crafted upon the highest points in the surrounding area, one is able to see a 360-degree panoramic. Because of this fact, we must reasonably and logically deduce and assume that these mounds were built as astronomical markers and observatories. The mounds with the bison, the corn-husking woman, and the bird and snake are all perfectly aligned east and west, showing clearly that the mounds were used to track the rising and setting sun and moon throughout the year. What I noticed when I was up there, freezing my tush off by the way, is that when one stands on the head of the bird and looks due west, on your right shoulder will sit the pole star, or Polaris, the star that the entire circle of the heavens rotates around every single night. Circumnavigating around the pole star of Polaris is the constellation Draco, which is Latin for dragon. Draco is considered a circumpolar constellation because, at least north of the equator, the dragon never sets and is always visible in the night sky. Or to put it more poetically, the dragon never sleeps. This correlation becomes interesting at Frank's Hill, considering that right in front of the bird is a mound of a coiled serpent. So from this vantage point, not only would the ancient mound builders be able to perfectly track and watch the rising and setting of the sun and moon throughout the year, but they would also have a perfect place to track and map the ever-revolving motion of the plate of the heavens above as well. There are generally 5 circumpolar constellations: Ursa Minor, or the Little Bear, containing the pole star; its sister constellation, Ursa Major, or the Big Bear, or more commonly known as the Big Dipper; Draco, the dragon who never sleeps; the ever-present M of Cassiopeia, and its counterpart, Cepheus, named after the mythical Grecian king Cepheus of Ethiopia, husband of Cassiopeia. There can be no doubt that these general star patterns were well known by the ancient mound builders. I can't help but think as well that the bird mound may be representative of the constellation Cygnus, which is very notable in the night sky as it includes the very bright star Deneb. Cygnus just so happens to be flying right near the constellation Draco. No matter what exactly the ancient mound builders were expressing within these mounds, it cannot be denied that they couldn't have picked a better spot to track and map the heavens above than on this little hill along the beautiful Wisconsin River Valley. Looking towards the setting sun, we see Franks Hill West. Walking across Highway 193 and then marching up the long, rather moderate little climb, we arrive at the 12 conical mounds clearly visible from the opposing hill. According to the Three Eagles Foundation, based on research conducted by Frank Shadewald and his colleagues, the mounds appear to track the setting sun from May 1st to the summer solstice and back again to around September 1st. This time frame represents the approximate growing season for corn in the latitude of Franks Hill. It seems more than reasonable to imagine that the 12 conical mounds represent the 12 months of the year. Taking Highway 193 back to 60 and then winding down along the Wisconsin River again for a few miles, we come to yet another effigy mound of a giant bird. And we can see that the Wisconsin River here is right in front of the bird. And when we zoom in, we can see that the bird is pointing almost directly due south. Now, this bird is not really marked or anything. There is a road there called Effigy Mound Road, I believe, but there is no sign denoting the bird at all. You can drive right by it and not even notice it. What is so interesting about this mound is that we can see that the wings of the bird, when you stand right at its tail, as I did when I was there, the wings of the bird seem to clearly mark the east and west ascension and declination of the sun, moon, and planets. Or in other words, the wings of the bird mark the ecliptic. I created a graphic here so it's easier to see what I'm talking about, but as you can see, I'm standing sort of at the back of the end of the bird, and the head of the bird points basically south, and then the wings mark the ends of the ecliptic. It's pretty wild. So what's even more fascinating about this mound is that when you just turn around and look due north from this position, the constellation Draco and the pole star stare right at you. So as far as I could tell from my limited time at the spot and my limited investigations, the bird mound is yet again another astronomical marker and one made with a high degree of knowledge of the patterns and cycles of the stars. These mounds are not just crudely cut earthenworks fuddled together by primitive Stone Age peoples a few thousand years ago. These mounds represent fairly advanced astronomical knowledge, with their features clearly marking and tracking the movements of the planets, sun, and moon, as well as the rest of the heavenly motions. Because of this fact, we must conclude that these mounds also carried with them a strong symbolic and spiritual significance. As we can see, these mound builders crafted into the landscape of the earth mounds to reflect the heavenly patterns above. The concept of uniting the heavens and earth is simply summed up as above and so below, a philosophical adage used by alchemists, Gnostics, Hermeticists, mystics, and the like. The study of archaeological sites having a cosmological counterpart is a dense study called Archaeoastronomy. Countless books have been written about archaeoastronomy, and there is no shortage of information on this topic. It is certainly not wild to assume that this indigenous culture undoubtedly at the core held these very same ideas.
It's sad to see it, but I was hoping I wasn't that way, but that's pretty much the way things are going now. They'll tell you what they know about the mounds, but they're pretty limited as far as the oral history. They'll tell you, well, I built these mounds. When they were kids, they'd go build a mound, so they understand that's still in them, that they can remember their mom telling them they should go build a mound, but the reason they were told to go build a mound is so that you build it up so they can know where you are. And that's, if you look at all these mounds, look at these. The way that was laid out, they're meant to be seen from above.
And they're so big in size that you stand on them on the ground, you don't figure it out until you spend a half a day walking around them. Then you can kind of get the picture. But north of Frank's old house here, there's one out in the field there that's a quarter-mile long. It's a bird mound. So, and that's only meant for one way, and that's to be seen from above.
The Serpent Mound in Ohio is a widely recognized example of one of these earthenworks beautifully preserved to this day. The Serpent Mound in Adams County, Ohio, a place I visited myself, is a fantastic piece of prehistoric mound building history. Stretching 1,348 feet over the ground, the beautifully preserved ancient earthwork depicts larger-than-life sinews of an immense serpent uncoiling and what appears to be biting into an egg. The Serpent Mound has been extensively studied and is well known to give several markers on the horizon to rising and setting times of the sun and moon, clearly an astronomical marker of many different uses. I think it's pretty safe to assume that a big undulating and coiled serpent on the ground is yet again another expression of the heavenly patterns above reflected on the earthly ground below. Author and independent researcher Gary Davis discusses in his book The Orion Zone how the Anasazi natives may very well have placed their cityscapes in position to reflect the stars of the constellation Orion, one of the most easily notable constellations in our night sky.
And these were the earthworks. Squire and Davis in 1846 worked for the Smithsonian, and they mapped all these structures, and they did extensive mapping. And what they found was these weren't close geometrically, they were perfect. They learned how to square the circle. They understood square roots, pi, and these were astounding structures that were amazingly precise. And we have never heard of this. It's astounding that we didn't learn this, at least in college. The former head of the Smithsonian did not know that the mound builders existed until 1992. Yes, that's like not knowing the pyramids are here. It's ridiculous. This is the Newark earthwork, one of the most enigmatic earthworks on Earth. 20 acres, 30 acres. Truncated pyramids. It is a sophisticated lunar observatory, among other things. Ask a farmer how big that is. It is preserved as a golf course. It measures the 18.61 metonic cycle of the moon, among other things. The Athenian meton in 432 BC is supposed to be the originator of the metonic cycle, but I think we see now that it was understood well before his time. Right through, this is what it looks like. It is an eclipse predictor.
My question still remains. Growing up, why did I not hear more about this? Or rather, why did I not hear anything about this mound building culture during the 12 years of my federally mandated education? Most of these mounds are basically forgotten, not maintained or kept up, and so most of them have fallen out of the consciousness of the locals. Many are deteriorating, and many of them are hardly even recognizable anymore. Luckily, the website wisconsinmounds.com has done a great job of cataloging many of them. There are countless mounds scattered and peppered throughout the entire state of Wisconsin, many existing and still visible today. And for those of you who live in Wisconsin, some of these ancient earthenworks are a lot closer than you think. Many of these mounds can still be seen in some of the local parks in the capital city of Madison, as well as in and around its surrounding lakes. Mendota, Monona, Waubesa, Wingra, Lake Aganza, and further south at Lake Kashkagan. They're in Prairie du Chien, Prairie du Sac, Baraboo, Madison, Muscadet, Milwaukee. Don Greenwood of Cultural Landscapes Legacies Incorporated exclaims that there used to be thousands of these cultural remnants on the landscape. Many have been lost to the plow, to roadways, to development. The only known extant effigy mound in the shape of a man at Man Mound Park, Baraboo, was cut through the legs by a highway project. A magnificent bird effigy called the ghost eagle, because it was unnoticed until its faint image was spotted in aerial photos, has a wingspan of 1/4 mile, but annually diminishes from being plowed.
Said the sun was coming up. 3 eagles flew right overhead, just like the blue angels. It's quite spectacular, I thought. It made kind of a believer out of me.
It is quite amazing to me that I grew up with the rich geological history of the peoples who used to live here all around me, and it took nearly 36 years for me to even hear of it. Though the scattered history, story, and mythos of these people is one we will never fully flesh out or know in its objective entirety, we can still retain a sense or essence of the indigenous culture that once thrived upon this great continent. There could be no question that from the pyramids of Cahokia, Illinois, to the Serpent Mound of Ohio, all the way to Franks Hill in Muscoda, Wisconsin, there once existed a widespread culture that clearly expressed a high wisdom. They expressed the knowledge of the heavens above and crafted that knowledge into the earthen works below. And this knowledge has lasted for thousands of years, through plow and backhoe, pick and shovel. Long enough for me to make this little movie on it. I didn't even know growing up that all this stuff was all around me. A geological history of the native peoples of this continent, of whom I share blood with, was all around me, and I had not the slightest clue. Even in the very place I called home, I had been lost in my own history. Have we lost our place? Do we know where we are? How many of us could go out on a clear evening and even point out where the pole star is? Maybe each and every one of us need to build a mound up so we can remember where we are.
The reason they were told to go build a mound is so that you build it up so they can know where you are.